Middle East is facing fire once again. This time, the conflict has begun by Iran, which launched ballistic missile barrage on northern Israel. It has struck Ramat David Air Base, which is 20 kilometers from Haifa, which is a city in Israel. The Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, which is the premier military organization belonging to Iran, has warned that future aggressions would trigger broader strikes against US as well as Israeli targets, which would end up shattering months of fragile diplomatic efforts that have been taken care. When and how did this end up here? On 8th of April 2026, Donald Trump, the president of USA, had announced that USA has reached a diplomatic negotiation pact with Iran. However, on the other hand, Trump and US, for putting maximum pressure, continue to batter Iran through missiles. Finally, under constant US pressure, on June the 7th, 2026, Iran responded with a barrage of missiles on Israel's air bases in northern Israel. So, things which seem to be moving in the right direction have now again come back to point zero. That means the conflict now has again begun between Israel, USA on one hand, and Iran on the other hand. If you look at this picture, Iran is fighting Israel here because Israel has been bombing Lebanon. The flashpoint here is Israel's bombing of Lebanon. Now, why is Lebanon even a country in the question? Iran has a proxy agency working in Lebanon. It calls it as Hezbollah. Now, Hezbollah is a proxy organization which works for Iran. Israel has been bombing Lebanon to weaken Hezbollah. So, with the constant bombing of Israel and the loss of innocent lives in Lebanon, Iran sees that it is up to it to stop or to interfere into these efforts. The catalyst here for this renewed conflict is the bombing of Israel on the city of Beirut in Lebanon. On the morning of June 7th, Israel struck southern Beirut, defying US direct request for restraint. Now, this is also a point in question that US has been requesting Israel to exercise maximum restraint in dealing with Lebanon or Israel because US now seeks to have a peace negotiation or a peace deal with Iran. However, Israel on the other hand doesn't seem to be in favorable condition or doesn't want a peace deal with Iran. Now, Israel is very sure that it would only negotiate with Iran when Iran's nuclear capabilities are all taken away. So the only condition that Israel has to deal with Iran is that Iran's nuclear capabilities are completely destroyed. USA, on the other hand, says that even after the maximum pressure being put upon Iran, its nuclear capabilities have not been nullified. So with the maximum pressure and the losses that have been mounting on the world right now, US says it's a better deal to just negotiate with Iran as of now and take care of the things in the future. Israel definitely has the same mind. So the Beirut bombings have renewed this conflict once again. Now Tehran views the protection of Hezbollah as a non-negotiable strategic priority. We just understood what Hezbollah is all about. For Tehran, which is Iran, Hezbollah becomes a very important asset. It has its foot. Hezbollah is the organization which is the eyes and ears for Iran as a strategic asset in the Middle East. So this is something very important for Iran. And with the constant bombings, Iran has come into picture. The American dilemma, what does it mean? USA on one hand is very much in support of Israel in trying to contain Iran's nuclear capabilities. On the other hand, it also wants to make sure that its assets as well as energy requirements are also taken care of. In the way, USA doesn't want to burn a lot of its money, on the other hand also wants to achieve its objectives in Middle East. So US Central Command maintains ongoing operations in southern Iran to protect American personnel amid escalating threats. For USA, it is imperative that it protects its military assets. Policy conflict. The administration struggles to stabilize the Lebanese front while managing wider regional confrontation. While protecting your military assets, America has not been able to stop Israel from attacking Lebanon, which again will lead to a broader regional conflict apart from Iran itself. So tomorrow US will have to juggle with multiple problems in the same area, which USA doesn't want to do, by the way. Political friction. In fact, US operations being conducted in Middle East are not even very popular in its own domestic political arena. For example, the House of Representatives has rebuked the current war powers, complicating the diplomatic mandate and limited executive options. Donald Trump, who seems to be very much in favor of Israel in trying to contain Iran, doesn't seem to be getting a lot of political support in America's political system. In fact, he has been facing certain pressures from his own Republican Party because this war doesn't seem to be popular in America. This is the dilemma that America faces. One hand, try to contain Iran. On the other hand, also do not engage or spend a lot of its financial resources there. What is the President Trump's pivot here? Trump has urged Iran to return to negotiations, claiming a peace deal is close for early next week, despite ongoing missile exchanges. Now, if you know Trump, he has been using this tactic of claiming that the negotiations are very close, the negotiations are next week, the negotiations would come by this month. He has been using this tactic to engage with Iran and keep them on the tenterhooks. This is one more addition to that series of claims by President Donald Trump. His diplomatic goal is ultimately to prevent Israel-Iran confrontation from derailing broader US-Iran negotiations, which are still in progress. America doesn't want Israel and Iran to go head-on against each other when it is still debating and deciding what could be the ultimate solution to this confrontation. So, for US President Donald Trump, this has become a headache or a nightmare. What are the regional stakes involved in this particular conflict? Lebanon, as a country which was working perfectly fine before this confrontation, now sees itself in the crossfire between Israel and Iran. Lebanon says, the government of Lebanon states that it has nothing to do with Hezbollah, or Hezbollah is not under its command. So, to control Hezbollah, the people of Lebanon and the infrastructure of Lebanon taking the attacks and facing these consequences is not appropriate. The front line of Iran's leverage, Lebanon, is a fragile state caught between Hezbollah's agenda and regional security pressures. So Lebanon is in a fix. It doesn't know how to come out of this problem. Energy markets. We know that since Iran has massive control over the Strait of Hormuz, this is the Strait of Hormuz. Since Iran has massive control over the Strait of Hormuz, Iran doesn't want to give up this leverage that it has. Because Iran kept on attacking any ships crossing the Strait of Hormuz, America understood that it cannot beat Iran in its own backyard. So it went ahead and imposed an economic blockade on the Strait of Hormuz. Now, American ships are trying to guarantee a safety for the ships which try to enter or leave this Gulf of Persia or the Persian Gulf. Coming to military reality, Israel assesses plans for future operations while maintaining high alert defensive postures across northern front. Israel has been engaged in multi-front war. On one hand, it engages with Lebanon. On the other hand, it has been launching missile attacks on Iran as well. So for Israel, this is a critical posture as to where do I focus my military assets. Any wrong move here could undermine Israel's national security in the coming future. Now, the only option that we see or observe for this conflict to end is through diplomacy, which has been going on for a few months now. In this diplomacy, we observe that the third parties such as Pakistan showed great interest, and they have been engaging with USA on one hand as well as Iran on the other hand. But things have not moved according to the estimated factors. De-escalation through promised deals or further regional military expansion with unpredictable consequences could be the choice or difficult choices that have to be made right now. Either are the parties willing to de-escalate, or are the parties willing to carry on this conflict for longer, wherein both of the parties know very well that both of them will lose very heavily in the future. Critical deadlines. Negotiations expected to resume early this week to prevent a total ceasefire collapse. USA has been very clearly intending to end this conflict through a ceasefire deal as soon as possible. Israel has been the troublemaker in this entire deal. So how US convinces Israel to stop these attacks on Lebanon, and how ultimately the ceasefire deal is struck with Iran, is an interesting thing that we'll have to see in the near future. Right now the ceasefire is off the table, and right now the conflict is open for all the parties to engage. What is the final takeaway? Diplomacy remains the primary tool, but the margin of error has almost become zero. Because they have now stepped their foot so deep into the conflict that there is no chance of going back facing losses. So only and only diplomacy can solve this conflict. However, anything going wrong in the diplomacy can lead to catastrophic effect for the entire Middle East, which it has already been facing. So let us wait and watch as to what Donald Trump has to do about this particular ceasefire deal with Iran.